All right, everyone. So let's finish this section, which is about skeletal muscle contraction, hey? We already looked at topic 6, part 2A. And now let's remember where we left off. We left off here. Okay, we left off here, which is in the myofibril. Remember? Let me just put myself here out of the way. We ended up in the myofibril last time. So I think that we can remember how we said that it's like getting from point A to B in a big city. You need to encounter all these different structures and all the different things, and we need to basically find ourselves after a sequence of events in the myofibril. So that's what we're going to be doing from now on. So this little recording will look at how the events that happen in this little myofibril. Okay, so we have arrived at the myofibril and we have arrived at our destination. And as you can see, well, you can see down the bottom here, see there? Myofibrils are made up of two kinds of proteins. So one of these proteins is thick. Oh, let's just say thick. Say thick. Fix that up. One of these proteins is thick and the other one is thin. The thick protein is called myosin and the thin one is called actin. So let's have a look and see what they kind of look like. So this is the thick protein. This is myosin. Look, can you see how it's got little like little heads sticking out of it, like little golf clubby kind of things? Yeah. So that is the thick filament or protein. And this guy, I should stop calling them guys, this protein here is actin. And can you see there that actin is thinner, number one, and it also has other things around it. Can you see here that there's a little protein here called troponin, and then there's also this long kind of thing here, and it's called tropomyosin. So actin has two kinds of proteins kind of working with it, all right? Can you see here? This is troponin and this is tropomyosin. Now, what we need to do in order to use this protein, we actually need to get this protein out of the way. Can you see that it's covering little areas? Yeah. So those little areas there is where these heads, you'll see this in a minute, but I'll just show you for now. So these heads here, they stick onto those areas. And in order for that to happen, this protein here, which is called tropomyosin, needs to get out of the way. All right, essentially. So actin has a couple of regulatory proteins with it. Okay, let's move on with our story. Now, remember when we initially started looking at muscle tissue that we learnt that muscle tissue converts one type of energy to another type of energy, okay? And so muscle tissue actually converts chemical potential energy, so energy that is stored in molecules, and we're going to convert that into mechanical kinetic energy, which is movement. We're going to move things around. So we're going to use molecules, the energy stored in molecules, to move things around. Now that is pretty amazing. So this energy conversion happens in the myofibril, and it's got to do with myosin and actin, and this little molecule that you may have come across already, this little molecule is ATP. Now, ATP is made by organelles in the cell called mitochondria, because as everybody knows and everybody will remember for the rest of their lives, mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. So it gives you power, right? Now, let's have a look and see how this works. I don't want you to memorize the whole structure of this molecule. I just want you to look at this bit here. When we stick a phosphate, when we stick a phosphate, this phosphate to this one, we store energy. When we pull this phosphate off this one, when we break that bond, we release energy. I know, it's pretty crazy, but that's the way that we have evolved. We can store energy and we can release energy. And we use this little molecule in order to make our muscles contract. It's amazing. All right, let's have a look. Well, I don't want to confuse you because that's, you know what I'm like. I'm a very simple person. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at these steps in a schematic way to help your understanding, because if you understand how it works in a very simple way, then you'll be able to look at a picture and go, all right, I understand, because you know the basics. All right. Why doesn't it? Here we go. So we know that calcium, so when the action potential goes through the muscle cell, calcium enters the myofibril. Remember, calcium was in our storage tank. And in the myofibril, we have two proteins. We have actin and myosin. One is thick and one is thin. Right, so here we go. This is my representation of actin and my representation of myosin. So here is calcium. Here we go. So calcium, what it does, it moves those proteins out of the way. So we need calcium in order for this process to occur. Calcium gets actin ready to be able to interact with myosin. All right, so myosin, we saw before, has little heads sticking out of it. So let's add that to our interactive schematic. There we go. We only need one. Okay, this is very, very simple. We just need one to understand what's going on. Because if we understand one, then we'll understand millions of them. Okay, now we add in the ATP molecule. The ATP molecule interacts with the myosin head. We use the energy from the ATP molecule to grab onto actin and move actin. Here we go. The ATP molecule attaches to the myosin head, and then we grab onto actin. How cool is that? All right, so once that myosin head grabs onto actin, guess what it does? It's going to pull it. Absolutely. It just grabs it and pulls it along. And then we have used up that ATP molecule, okay? So we've just used up the ATP molecule. Now, what I want you to look at now is a little GIF. This shows you myosin and actin. And I want you to just have a look at how we use up the ATP molecule. So the ATP molecule goes from ATP to ADP because we've used up the energy. So the ATP is the molecule that has the energy stored, and ADP is where we've used up that energy. Now, you don't need to know all the steps here. You just need to understand that little part of the ATP molecule, okay? And calcium is needed to move these proteins out of the way because myosin needs to stick to those little spots. Okay, now let's just think about it for a second. Imagine that what we just saw, imagine that happening in both directions. Okay, so that would look like that, right? This would be your myosin, this would be your actin. But can you see how you can have that kind of set up in two sides? So one's on the left and one on the right. Yeah, so that's the way it kind of works. You have myosin, it's got little heads on both ends. And actin, okay, gets pulled inwards. Now, imagine that this is actually called a sarcomere. Imagine if we had lots and lots of these end to end. Let's have a look and see. Look at this. Yes. So if we have lots of these end to end, our entire myofibril is going to shrink. Is it not? Yes. So if we look at our myofibril, okay, here is our muscle cell that I made for you. We know that a muscle cell is a cylinder, and inside the cylinder it has other smaller cylinders. So in my 3D model here, you can see that the myofibrils are all red. So what would happen if all of the red cylinders became shorter? Well, that would mean that the entire muscle cell will become shorter. Yeah? All right. So let's have a look at this. We know that muscle organs are made up of muscle cells. So you have one structure. Okay, it's kind of like those Russian dolls. So let's have a look at this model. So we have the muscle organ in pink, and the muscle organ is made up of lots and lots of muscle cells. And all of the muscle cells are made up of myofibrils. So what would happen if all of the muscle cells became shorter? Well, that would mean that the whole muscle organ will become shorter. Okay? All right. So what I have here is a nice little kind of infographic designed by an artist. And can you see here, it brings it all together. You have the sarcomeres, you have the myofibrils, muscle cells. So these are the myofibrils in here. This is the muscle cell, and that causes the whole thing to shorten. You can also see all the different processes of all the calcium coming out as well. So spend a little bit of time looking at this infographic. It will really, really help you understand the whole process. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that.